Hello, everybody. Welcome to Profiling Evil by Mike King. It's choir practice. And tonight is a really special choir practice because we've got some law enforcement, some law enforcement folks on the show tonight. So anything anyone says tonight is not representative of their agency or agencies. It is personal opinions by the officers who are here. And it is just really a thrill to have him here. I want to just shout out to so many of you who are already in the room and joining us. Miss Sophia, Mimi J2, Garden Girl, Terry Rickert. Great to see your names popping in and filling up so quickly. I want to thank the mods for taking time and keeping the conversations watched over. And I want to thank all of you for the really high level in which you keep your comments. It is much different than in many other places when I look around on YouTube, and I just really appreciate the little higher class way in which you communicate, and even the higher class way you complain about things. Scott Becker, great to see you. Shyla, Nicole, Marie. Again, it's really nice to see you. It's been a really interesting week. And thanks to all of you for reaching out to me in regard to the homicide of the girls in Delphi. That's been an interesting experience to not only take what we know from the media, but some of the inside information that we're learning about that case. Again, folks, the purpose of what we do is to highlight cases in hopes that you will step up if you know something and share it with law enforcement. I have great confidence that law enforcement will do their job, and while it may not be as fast as you'd like it to be at times, that they will solve these cases and bring people to justice. I want to shout out a special thanks to Samantha Morton for the kind donation you made this week, and let you all know that those donations are really appreciated. If you can't do it, it's no problem. We still love having you here. We love looking for your comments. Please consider your super chats. For those of you who are Patreon customers or part of our channel memberships, thank you. I mean, that does make a difference that when we're able to push out good content because you do donate to us. Tonight is going to be a really special night. We're going to get going right now. I want to welcome a special guest co-host tonight, Chief Johnathan Lewin of the Chicago Police Department. How you doing, Johnathan?
Good, sir. How are you, Mike?
Doing really well. It's great to have you here. I'm going to tell people a little bit about you because every time I've asked you to introduce yourself, you say, I'm Johnathan Lewin from Chicago, and that's about the extent of it. But I want people to know a little bit more about you. Chief Lewin, folks, retired from the Chicago Police Department about a year ago to take a new position as the Chief Information Officer for the District of Columbia's Metropolitan Police Department, the DC Police Department. He was recruited away from DC shortly after to become a member of the nation's first public safety broadband network. It's something called FirstNet, and he is an employee of FirstNet government where he works today. But and maybe we'll have a moment to talk about that, because what FirstNet does is absolutely game-changing for law enforcement. When you think of a major event happening and how you hear people complaining about the infrastructure for mobile phones going down and not being able to make calls or send out texts to family, law enforcement has a dedicated network so they can continue to protect and serve, and it's really remarkable. But Johnathan, during your illustrious 30-year career, I can't even begin to count the number of accolades and awards you received. But you also have been providing consultation to law enforcement agencies around the world. And your experience doesn't only extend from the trenches of Chicago Police Department, but you're also educated. You got academic degrees from Southern Illinois University, a master degree from Northwestern, and you also have a master degree from the U.S. Naval Postgraduate School, where my buddy Chris Bellavita works. Did you work a lot with Chris?
Yeah, outstanding. I think he was among all of our favorite professors.
He is a remarkable person. We actually became friends during the 2002 Winter Olympics when I was in the command center there, and we brought Dr. Bellavita in to help us there. But you know what, folks? My favorite thing to say about Johnathan is just that he's been my longtime colleague and friend. So, Chief, welcome to the show. And I love this picture. Maybe we could even zoom in on this. This is us just a couple years ago with Joe Keyson at IACP. But tell folks a little bit more about you that I didn't touch on.
Mike, I think you covered it, and also let me just say I'm thrilled to be here. This is great, and you've been an outstanding partner with us for many years. But yeah, I born and raised in Chicago. My dream was always to work in law enforcement. I was lucky enough to merge that dream with a passion for technology. And when I came on the job in 1991, I remember walking up to the district desk in Rogers Park when I first got on the street, and there people were sitting behind the desk, literally using like preschool scissors and Elmer's glue to cut and paste things into a book, like a leather-bound book. This is 91, keep in mind. And I asked what they were doing, and they said, "Oh, we're updating messages in the CO book." So that was literally the communications method back then. So I've been lucky enough to make some technology changes in Chicago, and as you said, work with a number of other departments around the U.S., and now I'm with the First Responder Network Authority. So great to be here.
Well, I'll tell you, I think back to the number of times that I sat with you at the police department, and we talked about increases in violent crime, and we're going to come back and visit a little bit about that. But you revolutionized the Chicago Police Department and was integral in putting together those community or district stations where they look at and analyze crime so carefully. It's just been short of remarkable to watch the technology that you brought to the police department, because I'll tell you what, that's an awfully big town you come from, and the crime problem is horrendous there.
Yeah, and the project you mentioned is probably the culmination of everything that my team and I worked on. We call them the Strategic Decision Support Centers, SDSCs, and I had the chance to work with a couple other police departments around the country, helping them get similar projects implemented. But it's kind of a fusion center, if you will, that brings technology and process to the edge out to police districts. And today it's in districts throughout Chicago and a couple other cities as well. And it uses state-of-the-art mapping, as you know. In Chicago, it uses sensors, gunshot detection, surveillance cameras, analytics. That's a big piece of it. Predictive tools, which are essentially a risk model to try to determine where violent crime is most likely to occur in the future. Ties all that together with a very rigorous process to implement what at the time we were calling precision policing. And it's really just about using information more effectively and sharing information both with officers on the street and with the public, with the community, to empower first responders to make them more effective and safer.
Well, it's amazing, and we're going to dig into this in a minute. Folks, I want you to know that if you have any questions tonight, just put them in the chat box. The back office is looking. They'll pop those up as it makes sense. But let me bring in Johnathan, our first guest. And folks, Johnathan, as guest host, is going to be firing questions at him just like I'm going to be. But I want to introduce our first guest, who is Officer Richard Riley of the Montgomery, Ohio Police Department. Officer Riley, I think, is a little bit camera shy, but at the prompting of his chief, maybe the order of his chief, he's joining us tonight. And with him is Mary Thress, a resident of the Montgomery area. And I invited the two of them to come on and share a pretty remarkable story. And Johnathan, you're not going to believe this. Well, you are going to believe it because you see it every day in law enforcement. But in January of this year, Officer Riley stopped to help a stranded motorist in the Sycamore Township area. Rich helped change a flat tire for Mary, and then he sent her on her way. Now, if I'm getting this right, little did they know that their paths would cross again before very long. But Mary, would you just take a moment first, introduce yourself, and tell everybody about meeting Rich and him helping you stop or change a tire, and just how you felt about this guy for stopping and helping change a tire.
Well, a woman came over into my lane, causing me to hit the curb, and that blew out my front tire. And I chased her about a mile down the road and got her to pull over and stopped in the middle of this big parking lot. It was a Camargo Cadillac. And she rolled her window down, sitting there with the tiara on and a sash. And I said, "Hey, you came over into my lane and caused me to blow out my front tire." "I did not." And then she took off around me. I'm like, I'm not very happy about that. But, I'd already called the police on her because I had taken a picture of her in front of me and everything. And Rich didn't assist me in changing the tire. He changed the tire. We couldn't even find it. He had to Google to find out where the tire was in my car because I had no clue. It was just one of those things. But he very graciously changed it, and luckily it wasn't super cold or raining. So that was where we first met. Nice guy. I mean, he's very jovial and just very pleasant. Not what you're used to for a lot of officers. Sorry, my dog wants to play. And I said, "Hey, I just went to Montgomery Police as it was National Law Enforcement Appreciation Day. So I was delivering cakes to different, police stations." And I said, "Have you been back to the house yet?" And he goes, "No." I said, "Well, here, I still have a box here. You want these?" "Oh, yeah." Okay. Yes.
So you were actually delivering cakes from your business to local law enforcement just to say thank you.
Absolutely.
Well, I think you were paying it forward in a way that you had no idea what was going to happen. And folks, I don't know if you're catching the vision here, but changing a tire, that's pretty amazing. But Rich, you changed this tire, and then you just went about patrolling the rest of the night until how much later?
It wasn't. It was probably within half an hour, and I had gone back to the station, washed my hands, brought the bundt cakes in, shared some of them with the fire department because we had 2 whole boxes of them by this point. And Mary had mentioned that she knew one of the officers I worked with who wasn't on that night, and I got a telephone call on station from in-law of hers. And Joe Asbrock, who's a lieutenant with Evendale, another suburb of Cincinnati, and he said, "Hey, Rich, where's Mary?" And I kind of knew there was a connection. I didn't know exactly what the connection. I thought he was joking with me, that he was actually calling to thank me for changing her tire. So, of course, I respond, "Well, the wheel probably fell off and she's in a ditch somewhere." Well, Joe goes, "No, seriously, she hasn't showed up and we can't get her on the phone. Do you have any ideas?" And so that kind of started the search and rescue mission. He told me she was headed to a party north of town, and he didn't give me the exact address, but I started looking for her at that point.
This is amazing, isn't it, Johnathan? I mean, just the fact, I call it a divine intervention, but the fact that Mary first is paying it forward by taking care of law enforcement, she then has a flat tire, and this just regular Joe street cop drives by and changes the tire for her, and we start seeing this thing unfold. And I don't know. I mean, you see it every day, don't you? But this one's a little different. You may have missed your cue there, but Darcy Ann 66, thank you so much. We're gonna get back. I'm gonna have you hold that question until Johnathan, if you'll just pay close attention to that. When we're done with Rich, we'll talk about that. How does Chicago PD help officers in cases of children being killed, especially drive-bys, and how do you get the community to speak up. But we're going to come back to that in just a minute. But Rich, it's just a short time later, and kind of unfold this for us. Tell us the rest of the story.
Well, I drove in the direction of the party and didn't see Mary, but I didn't actually have the address of the party. But I saw that she lived nearby, and I didn't know which way she left because I went to the back of the dealership before she pulled off because I was kind of blocking the exit. And so she lived south of the dealership. So I go, well, maybe she drove home. So I drove to her house, and Mary wasn't there, but a young lady that Mary's taken in was there. And I go, hey, are you looking for Mary? And she said yes. And she got a telephone call. And so I held on. She goes, hey, they want to talk to you. And there was another lady from the party. And she's like, hey, we're really worried about Mary. She has diabetes. Would you mind putting out a broadcast for other officers to be on the lookout for her? I said, by all means. And so, of course, I asked for the address of the party. I started headed towards, the complete route, and I call up the Hamilton County Communications Center, which handles our 911, and gave them all the information where Mary was last seen, where she was headed, and that she was overdue. And they put out a radio broadcast to all the units in the county, and which is a good thing because that's another one of those little coincidences or guardian angel helping out, because Deputy Babs from Sycamore Township, he got the be on the lookout, and he started looking for Mary also. And he found her within 5 minutes.
So, Mary, what do you remember about this next part of the story?
Nothing. I was out. I had.
Do you remember how you crashed or anything?
No.
So maybe you could just describe what you've been told as far as how you ended up in this position. And then I want to kind of show a video of what Rich saw next.
Okay. I didn't know anything until I got to the emergency room, what had happened. I had the diabetic episode, and you talk about divine intervention. I roll into a church parking lot and hit a picnic table in a tree. My daughter, who lives in Austin, said, Mom, I've been an atheist for a while, but I'm starting to believe there is something up there guiding us, and I just say, oh, damn, Gina, you are right. Her name's Taylor, but that's my phrase, damn, Gina. It's something. Yeah. I really have no words because it still just boggles my mind how everything turned out, and that I'm still here, as I shouldn't be.
Yeah, I mean, Johnathan, what are the chances of all of this happening in this order?
This is amazing to me. I mean, I thought the story was just going to end at the changing of the tire. I didn't think it was going to. I didn't even know that this was going to be part of it. This is just incredible. This divine intervention.
Well, so Rich, you're driving and something catches your attention. What is it?
Well, I was actually headed to the location of the party, and I did drive through. We have a hospital in town. They had already called the hospital, but sometimes people make it to the parking lot, but not inside. So I checked the parking lot and continue on my way to the party. And then Lieutenant Asbrock called me back. He's like, hey, we're really worried. Do you think we could ping the phone? And I'm like, I think this totally fits pinging the phone. And so I'm hanging up to call the communications center again. And we're by a popular restaurant, or I was by a popular restaurant. I go, while I'm on the phone, I'll just check this parking lot. And as soon as I hung up, Deputy Babs had located Mary. Now I kind of caught the tail end of, I didn't know where he found her at, but I knew he found her. And so I called Lieutenant Asbrock, who was off duty at the party, back right away. Hey, they found Mary. I just don't know where yet because the CAD hadn't updated on my computer, so I didn't have an address. And eventually it does populate. And I tell him, well, she's at this address on Fields Circle. And he's like, where's that? And I'm like, well, hold on. So I went through a couple steps to pull up another agency's detail. And I said, hey, it's this church between Whippoorwill and another cross street. And Whippoorwill is where the party was. So Mary almost made it to the party. And so I start driving up there, and Deputy Babb said, she's unconscious. She's in the car. Send the life squad. I'm going to try to unlock the car. There's no fire at this point. And so I'm just headed up there. I'm just a mile or so away, a mile or two away. So I'm just headed up to the, where Mary was found. When I get up the field circle, I see Deputy Reese. He's also responding. And so I follow behind him, and I'm like, this is great. I don't have to actually find the place because it's a little bit out of my bailiwick, and follow him to the church. And when I park at the church, that's when I just see the ground behind the car on fire. But obviously fire, it's concerning, but it seemed really minimal at that point. But by the time I ran up to the side of the car, then it's up to our shins, and it's like, we got to get her out of the car now.
Yeah, let's stop right there, and let's play the video from your Axon body cameras and let people see what was really going on there.
Watch out! Watch out! Get that car open up. John!
And that's you in the car, Rich, right?
Yeah, I'm up by the front seat. That's correct.
Yeah.
Let me grab her arm. Get the seatbelt off. Let's go.
There we go. Johnathan.
Wow. I mean, that hero, that I'm sure you got a lifetime award for that. That's just, I'm stunned. That's amazing.
Mary,
when you made it to the church on time, Rich.
Yeah, when you see that, Mary, what's going through your mind now? I mean,
it took me about a week to even look at that video, and I've only seen it. This is probably only the third time I've seen it because it's very emotional and it's very hard to watch. They don't have the part on there, luckily, of me screaming, because then apparently I was conscious and I remember seeing stuff floating around in the air, but still not really aware of what was going on. I just thankful, grateful, blessed. Rich is my hero, and Joe. I mean, everybody who culminated to make sure I got found. I mean, God, who has friends like that? Because Joe and his wife are good friends, and then the other Cheryl and Jeff Groshans, whose house we were going to, they're really good friends. And who has the wherewithal to something's wrong? Just have that gut that knows that something's wrong, and to be proactive to find me. I mean, I don't know why I'm still here, but I am for a reason, and it's I guess to do more good.
well, I don't know if you can see the comments that are in the chat window right now, but there are hundreds of comments going on talking about your bravery, Rich, about your bravery, quite frankly, Mary, to even look and talk about this. And as Jacqueline Tennant says here, you are certainly blessed. Terry Rickett says all first responders are all amazing. And I have to agree with you. Karen Claddy, thank God for those officers.
Well, and that's true, because you never know. You go through the training, but until you're actually put in the situation, you don't know how you're going to actually react, if you're going to be able to go in there. And when I saw the video of Rich going in there and pulling me out, I mean, oh my God, I saw him 2 weeks ago or a week ago Saturday, and I just gave him the biggest hug and I started crying. I'm like, you're the reason I'm here and you're my hero. And, you know, my kids, I have 4 kids and it's like, and 3 grandkids. And yeah, my brother, I'm having a big party once the weather breaks and having everybody. And my brother's like, I want to thank all these people. You know, he's older than me and he's just like, I got to thank all these people who, you know, the ones who saved you, the ones who've been taking care of you. I mean, the outpouring of support I have had from people is just amazing. And Rich, I mean, he burned his hands. He had second degree burns on your hands. I mean, so he, you know, he was injured too. And you're at the desk right now, aren't you? Because of that?
No, I'm
Are you on duty again?
so I'm back on the road. So
Oh,
that's
good.
But yeah, let's talk about that because I mean the photographs, and I didn't want to put these up, Rich, but the photographs of the burns that you had on your hands were incredible. This was no small thing. What was going through your mind? Help people understand how a cop thinks. Because, you know, we've had a pretty rough year for law enforcement the last year. And sometimes we forget that there are cops that really believe in this idea of protect and serve. And you're an example of that. Tell them what was going through your mind.
Well, of course, with fire, you know, you're trained your whole life. Don't touch the stove. And it was hot. It was hot next to the car. But Mary's there. So it's like your mind's telling you, well, I know it's hot, but you got to save Mary. And Deputy Babs was trying to break a window, and he actually had a window break knob on the back of his knife, but apparently we didn't have the right technique. So it wasn't working. I was using my baton. And so it's very frustrating to begin with. And now the flames are coming up to about chest high, and it's like we don't have, you know, I had a fire axe in the trunk of my car. But it's like, I don't want to run 30 yards back and then to the car and then back. It's like, we got to get this open now. So we ended up there. I shot out the rear window with my service pistol, and that got us into the car. And I was hoping to just be able to unlock the front door, but the plunger was recessed. So it's like, okay, we have to open up the back door. And actually, that's where the burns came from. All those flames pretty much were singeing, but I laid my hand inside the door and ran it down till I felt the door latch. So that's where my hand got burnt, was rubbing it along the inside of the rear door. And as soon as I opened that door, the handsome guy that jumped into the back seat in civilian clothes, that was Lieutenant Asbrock. So, like I said, he was closer to Mary than I was. So he actually arrived to the church a little bit before I did, and he's trying to break the windows too. He's like, you know, we just need to shoot it. And I agreed with his assessment, and I did. Well, as soon as I opened that door, he hopped right into the back seat. I mean, he didn't think for a second. So he hops into the back seat and he unbuckles Mary's seatbelt and he unlocks the doors. I get the driver's door open, and so I'm grabbing Mary, but she's not coming. And again, it's really hot. I don't want to do this, but it's like, she's right there. You have to, but she's not coming out. So I have to retreat again. I go, is she unbuckled? He's like, hey, yeah, I got her unbuckled. He goes, oh, she's got death grip on the seatbelt. So he says, I got to undo her hand. So Lieutenant Asbrock got her hand. He's like, pull her out now. So it was really, I mean, it was a team effort. I got burned just because I ended up being a front lineman or whatever. I had to do the hot work. But if it wasn't for Mary's friends sounding the alarm, the 911 center, they took my call, they put it out. Deputy Babs, I called him Eagle Eyes. He found her in a short period of time, and then all of us, particularly Joe and myself, getting her out of the car. It was a team effort. The back of this church, there's actually houses, definitely within 100 yards, probably less than that. But it's cold out. I guess people had their windows up. Nobody heard her car revving back there, and if Deputy Babs hadn't found her and we hadn't got her out of the car, we would have got a call eventually, but it would have been for a car fire and it would have been too late. So I am glad that
Chief Lewin, I mean, how many police officers did you have in Chicago?
Almost 13,000.
How do you teach something like this to a street cop?
Well, I think, and Rich kind of hit on this. I think for the people on the scene, for Rich, for the lieutenant, it was just instinctive, right? I mean, Rich, you didn't hesitate. You went in. You were a hero. You went in, and somebody had to be saved. And this is what draws many of us to policing. And these stories, to me, are what makes it all worthwhile. And one thing I wanted to ask Rich and Mary is, did this get press, at least locally? Because I haven't heard about this nationally. This is the first time I've heard about it.
It did, and we were on live rescue. And what I loved about the live rescue segment, they focused on the good of what the police officers did. All they mentioned about me was 2 police officers went into a burning car and rescued a 60-year-old woman. And the rest was focused on how brave they were, what heroes they were, are. They will always be my heroes. And when I found all the, because I was getting Facebook things. Oh my gosh, I saw you on Louisville News. I saw you here. Oh, I saw this out on California. They're bakery owners. It's like, and what they did, like I said, was promote the goodness of police officers, because you have had a really, rough couple of years, undeserved, so many. And for me, I hate that I had to go through it, but you know what? If this put police officers in a better light, it's worth it. My burns are going to heal that I have. And I still have letters to write to Rich's chief and to Joe's chief, because I just haven't been able to wrap my mind around it until lately. I had surgery, I guess, 2 weeks ago. So it's all okay. Now things are starting to click in, but these, yeah.
Well, Mary, I would say you're a hero too.
No, I'm not. No.
Amen. And I think that if you could see the chats coming in, you would see what people are thinking about both of you. We feel so honored that you would take time. And the only thing I can say is, will you come back and we'll talk about something else sometime? Maybe revisit this. And Rich, how many years have you got on?
35 years.
Thank you so much for your service. Only those who have been in the trenches know what that is like. And I don't know about you, Johnathan, but I still know that I'd have the stomach to be a street cop today.
Oh, I have so much respect and admiration for people that are out there. It's such a challenge, but I'm glad I'm glad the heroes are still out there. Rich, I'm glad you're still out there.
Me too.
They started.
Yeah, and I hope, Rich, you'll tell us if a departmental accommodation comes your way, because we'd love to have you come back on to Profiling Evil and choir practice and get just that little extra bit of recognition you deserve. And Mary, I am so mad that I don't live nearby, because as you can tell from looking at my physique, I love a good bundt cake. Tell everybody about your business, because you've got quite a business in town.
Well, for one, Rich obviously has free bundt cakes for the rest of his life. And Rich, when you do get your medal, however they're going to recognize you, I do want to be there. Okay. Nothing Bundt Cakes, it's a franchise. I got into this about 5 years ago, and it has been the best thing ever. I was in a process of divorce. This opportunity came up. I have a partner, but I'm the one who runs everything. She's kind of the silent one. But the people I have met and the things I get to do with those cakes, I help tons of fundraisers, with the police. Oh, okay. Hey, somebody did this. Well, we need to go take a cake there. And the joy it brings. I had no idea cake made people so happy, during the pandemic. It's
always made me happy. I don't know.
Well,
Same here.
Okay, Mike, when you have one of these cakes, because obviously you've never had one, you will never go back to any other cake. I promise.
So, Johnathan, you might need to make a surprise appearance next week long enough for what we might be able to eat on screen, courtesy of Mary Thress and Bundt Cake.
I will be there. And I would also ask Mary if she would consider opening a franchise location in Chicago.
Oh, there's like 50 of them up there. I actually trained in Chicago before I opened my one in Mason, Ohio.
Okay.
It was in Elmhurst. That was where I trained.
Well, I'm in the city in Wrigleyville. I'm about 2 blocks from Wrigley Field, and there's none right near here.
There's one downtown. Jeff and Ryan own that one. I can't remember where it is, but it's right downtown. And I'll reach out to them. I'm going to make sure everybody gets cake.
Well, as Mike said, I think you can never have too much cake.
No, you can't.
Well, Officer Richard Riley, thank you so much. God bless you. Thanks for the work that you do. Mary, thank you for taking time to get on. We're going to have you back. Johnathan, anything you'd like to say before we send them on their way? Because we have a special, and Rich, I want you to hang in the background and listen, because we have a special little treat from someone following what we end here with.
No, I'm just so proud and privileged to have met you both, and keep up the good work, Rich and Mary. Hang in there.
Thanks, Jonathan.
I'm privileged to have met Rich, changing my tire. Yeah. Thank you, Rich. You will always be my hero. You and Joe and Officer Babs. I didn't realize how involved Officer Babs is. Actually, I also have. I know you don't have time now, but my one dog, Blue Healer, the Hamilton County Dispatch. There's a man out there. His name is John, and I have his dog because he couldn't keep him. And so I took, after having the dog for a little while, I took Cakes out to the dispatch too. And then ends
we'll keep
up
taking care of all of them, and until we get you
try.
back on, know how much we appreciate you. So all the best to both of you. Thank you so much. I wanted to, as we say goodbye to them, Johnathan, I wanted to take a moment to introduce everyone to a friend of mine, a concert pianist by the name of Marvin Goldstein. I recently spoke with Marvin and told him about Officer Riley and, frankly, the many other cops that we highlight from time to time on Profiling Evil. He watched some of the segments and was so touched, he called and said he wanted to send something for us to play tonight. So with that, let me just introduce everyone to internationally acclaimed pianist Marvin Goldstein. Oh, we missed, there was a portion of that where Marvin speaks directly to the police officers. So guys, if we can find that, I wanted that needed to be in there as well. But Chief, pretty remarkable little story, wasn't it?
Yeah, I mean, amazing. Both of them are heroes. Everybody on that scene was a hero, and that is why many of us came to policing, to be able to do exactly that. And 99.9% of officers anywhere in the U.S. Or the world, I think, would have done exactly that, because most police officers are heroes.
Yeah, that was just awesome. Well, Chief, I wanted to talk to you a little bit about this increase in violent crime we're seeing in our major cities across America. Just recently, we saw in the city of New York almost double the amount of violent crime, with some major changes happening in government. Law enforcement on one side of the fence is saying their hands are being tied, that they're losing funding as part of all of the efforts to try to figure out how we become better at policing. And then adding in COVID, we're seeing numbers like we haven't seen in a long time. What do you think's going on?
It's stunning to me. And when you first talked to me about being on the show, I just did a little bit of research because I wanted to find out exactly what the stats were. And I didn't even realize this, and this is according to a report from Arnold Ventures, part of the Arnold Foundation. Ashley Van Ness is the author. I actually used to work with her here in Chicago. But in 34 cities, homicides were up 30% in 2020 compared to 2019. This is the largest single year increase since 1968, and it's even bigger than 68. So back then it was a 12.7% increase. So this is the biggest single year increase on record based on these preliminary stats. And as you said, New York is up 40% in murders. LA is up 30%. Chicago's up 50% with 750. The numbers are just stunning. And I think that, the COVID headlines have kind of overshadowed the crime headlines in a lot of ways, because I work in the criminal justice system, and I wasn't even aware of that until you brought up the topic and I started doing some research. But, nobody has the answer, of course, but, I think COVID is certainly playing a role. I was reading about one professor who describes what we're living in now as an anger incubator. This is from Raymond Novaco. He's a psych professor at University of California at Irvine. He says Americans are getting more angry. He said, it's these combined pressures of COVID, civil unrest sparked by things like, George Floyd in Minneapolis. I mean, it's these things coming together and causing this crisis that I don't think we've seen in history. And I think the stats that we just talked about kind of bear that out.
Yeah. What do you think about even the numbers that we don't know about, that we're theorizing about, like domestic violence and child abuse and other kinds of things, where children are not in public schools, which used to be that place where we learned about a lot of these crimes that were occurring in homes, because they had a counselor to go to or someone else. Are we just beginning to see what could be increases in numbers?
I think so. And as you know, the crime stats are delayed. So even the numbers we just talked about are preliminary, and that is an important note, is that these are preliminary stats. They'll be, confirmed later this year. But if that bears out, and if the numbers start catching up with the reality, unfortunately, I think we're going to see other crimes follow. The good news, if there is any good news, is that property crime, burglaries seem to be down. Theft seem to be down because, of course, people are at home more. But the violent crime, you're talking about people's lives, domestic violence, huge issue, child abuse, huge issue. So unfortunately, I think you're going to see those numbers increase in some areas as well.
Yeah, I remember when your Chicago numbers were, frankly, even, 7 or 8 years ago, when they were really getting astronomical, and you put some really important measures into place in the districts, in the crime analysis end of things, in the real-time crime center end of things. Frankly, I think even back, and I think it was about the time Superintendent McCarthy was around, the increase in street checks and how it actually had a positive effect on lowering crime. But now we're seeing it go back up. Are there problems with the way administrations are responding because of all of the negativity we've experienced in the last year? And are cops getting to the point that they're just a little bit intimidated to do what needs to be done on the street?
Well, I think, organizations can be stressed as well. And these things that we talked about earlier are stressors on people, and they also are stressors on organizations. So, the organization obviously is made up of people. And if you look at, I was part of my research just before this, just a little while ago today, I was trying to find some opinion polls about how police officers feel about the jobs that they're asked to do. One was from June of 2020, Caliber Press and Police One. Only 7.2% of the approximately 10,000 officers surveyed would recommend police work to a son or daughter. And only about half, 50.8% say that they're pleased, but not as pleased as they used to be with their career choice. So that's the most recent poll that I could find. Then I had to go back to 2017, and this was a National Police Research Platform survey of 8,000 officers. 93% have become more concerned about their safety. 72% are less willing to stop and question people who seem suspicious. 76% more reluctant to use force when appropriate. So again, if those stats, and again, these are national surveys, so without talking about any specific jurisdiction, if those surveys are true, it does seem to suggest that police officers may feel perhaps less motivated to be as proactive as they had before some of these high-profile incidents, which really in a lot of places have caused a rift between the police and the community, a lack of trust on the part of really on both sides. Police legitimacy is something that we always talk about. The police can't operate without the support of the community, and if the community doesn't feel like they can trust the police, rightly or wrongly, but if that's how they feel, then that perception is going to translate into a lack of cooperation. That's going to make it harder to work with communities, because as you know, in this country, policing is done by consent of the people and with the support of the people. The police are part of the communities that they serve, and it's tough today. And you mentioned this earlier, to police in an environment where the police don't always feel appreciated. Just reading through the comments on the chats here during the earlier stories from Rich and Mary, and to me, it was gratifying to see that. And I do think this is how the majority feels, that most people, I think, do support the police, but somehow we need to bridge the gap, bridge the divide. Chicago does a community sentiment survey, and New York and other cities do it as well. Chicago uses some software called Elucid, which uses social media and other tools to kind of take the temperature of the community. So I was just looking at that. This is on the Chicago Police dashboard. So if you look at how the community feels, they call it a trust score, and it's a score of 1 to 10, with 10 being the most trust. So January of 21, this is citywide, the trust score is 5.9. January of 2020, it was 6.2 out of 10. 6.2 isn't great, but 5.9 is even worse. And then I looked at one of the most violent districts in the city on the west side, the 11th district of the city, and there the trust score is only 4.7, down from 5.5 in January 2020. If you look on the northwest side of the city, in a district with a lot less crime, the 16th district, the trust score is 7.8, which is good. What's striking to me is in the communities, or at least in this community, in this district, that has among the most violence in the city, the trust score is low, what I would consider low. So to me, that's part of the central issue, is somehow that trust has to come back.
Yeah, and how much of that is poverty and education driven? I mean, in many major cities, it ends up being that the impoverished are being perpetrated upon by the impoverished.
Yep. And unfortunately, often the crime in those communities is people from those communities victimizing people in those communities. So it's I worked in the 11th district. I worked in the 7th district. I worked in some of the busiest districts in the city, and the majority of the crime was, unfortunately, African-American on African-American crime in those communities. So part of it, I think, to your point, family, education, opportunities, jobs, these are often food deserts. Nutrition plays a role. So these communities, if you overlay a map, for example, if you look at a citywide map in Chicago and many other cities as well, and if you overlay crime with poverty, with lack of access to, educational resources, health resources, food resources, lack of nutrition, the hotspots match. And this from your mapping background, those hotspots overlay sometimes in stunning ways. And it's been that way for decades and decades and decades in many places. So these are chronic, long-term issues that don't have short-term solutions, but need to have some kind of intervention. And I'm not saying nothing's being done, because it is, but unfortunately, the confluence of these bad things all happening at once, I think, is really creating a challenge around the country.
Yeah, our major cities become really neural networks, don't they? Everything is interconnected, whether we like it or not. And it has to be a holistic overall answer. It can't be, well, let's just fix this one little area, the 11th district, because what we found over time, especially in crime analysis kinds of things, is if we push out the perpetrators from an area, perhaps we just go after parolees and probationers and push them out, all we do is relocate them to another area.
Yep, exactly. So you actually have to get to as you said, the root cause. There are causes of this violence. A baby is not born and decides to be a criminal when they're a baby. Something happens and they become part of this cycle of violence. And often there's gang involvement in many cities. Chicago happens to have a pretty entrenched criminal street gang problem. I think last time I looked, something like 65% of the violence in the city had some kind of a gang element. Gangs sometimes provide the structure that's lacking from families. They provide a support system. So something has to happen to address those contributors to violence. And to your point, it's not just the police. This has to be a holistic approach. And you are starting to see that. Some of these calls to defund the police, which, very controversial, but what does make sense to me is to shift some resources, not necessarily away from the police, but to other intervention providers like social services that might be able to intervene more appropriately than a sworn armed person dealing with somebody in mental health crisis, for example.
Yeah. Well, I want to start taking a couple of questions because I want to get to our next guest before too much longer. But Heather Marie says, I live in Chicago's 19th district. Do you think the CAT team is helping to bridge the gap in those communities? And then maybe you could also answer the previous question, which had to do with what are the resources in place to help children, like in drive-by shootings and other kinds of things?
Yeah, and again, remember, I'm retired from Chicago Police Department. I do happen to live in the 19th district, so I'm a neighbor of whoever asked that question. So I can't speak specifically to the CAT team because that started after I left. But I will say that those types of citywide units that can respond to violence rapidly can make a difference and have made a difference. And I'm hopeful that they will, because I'm part of this community too. In terms of children that are victims of violent crime, that I can tell you from personal experience is something that gets the highest level of police response and resourcing. And without speaking specifically about investigative techniques, I will say that the community is absolutely central to solving crime and also preventing crime. Community involvement. If we had everybody who's involved in the chat here if these people all lived in a city and were active with the police and helping to prevent crime, I think we'd have no crime, because this group is outstanding. And most people are. 99% of the community are law abiding, just like 99% of the police are good. It's that tiny fraction of even in the most impoverished parts of a community, most people in those communities are law-abiding, good people. It's unfortunately the criminals get the press, just like often there are bad cops, of course, just like in any profession, there's bad people. Unfortunately, they often get the press. That's why I was asking Rich earlier if he got any national press, because I didn't see it. I would like to see those kinds of stories celebrated and those kind of heroes, recognized nationally, and have more of a spotlight on them, because I think that would help not only morale with police officers, but it would also help the community see what great work is happening every day in every community of the U.S.
Yeah. Well, I want to take a minute and introduce you to somebody, Johnathan, that I just, again, a great friend, actually took the test for NYPD and decided to go a different direction. And I really wish we could have got him as a cop along the way, because he became a private investigator, and he has turned over some of the biggest cases in our country's history. I want to bring on Ed Opperman of the Opperman Report. Ed, how you doing, buddy?
I'm very good, Mike. How are you?
Doing really well. Meet Chief Johnathan Lewin.
And
Chief.
So, but before I go any further, because I know you think you have good pizza in New York, Ed,
Oh, yeah.
but I just got to say, Johnathan, Lou Malnati's or Giordano's?
I'm going to go with Giordano's.
All right. And Ed, best pizza in Bronx?
Well, I don't remember the Bronx. I left there when I was about 13 years old, but the best pizza in Staten Island, most people, I think it's Danino's, but I used to like Gino's Pizza over there in New Springville. But I haven't been there in 20 years, so I haven't been in Staten Island in 20 years.
Well, everybody, Ed Opperman is a radio talk show host and a private investigator. You can catch him every Friday night at 5 p.m. Pacific time, where he interviews expert guests and authors as they discuss true crime, news, and political topics. He loves to delve into conspiracy theories and issues of social injustice, and he's uncovered some of the biggest scandals in our country's history. We're announcing tonight, Johnathan, our new podcast series, the Profiling Evil podcast series. And the first interview we have set for this Wednesday is with Ed Opperman, and we're going to be talking about Jeffrey Epstein. Ed, I don't know. We're going to come back and chat a little bit about about Jeffrey Epstein in just a second, but give Johnathan an idea of some of the names that we've seen in the news that you have personally investigated.
Oh boy! Well, Johnathan, nice to meet you. Yeah, I've been involved in a lot of stuff, a lot of things. Some I can talk about and some I can't. But I did the cell phone forensics in the Tiger Woods case. I vetted out all the Tiger Woods mistresses. I did the first cell phones in Wienergate. I was involved in an investigation of Sarah Palin and Todd Palin. The 2016 lawsuit against Trump and Epstein. Charlie Sheen, I was involved in. I get involved in a lot of stuff, man. I get involved in a lot of stuff.
Yeah, I mean, Johnathan, what would you have given to have this guy and this knowledge when you're dealing with organized crime cases in Chicago, for instance?
Oh, a lot. I mean, and as you know, so much of this communication is electronic now, and it's becoming increasingly difficult to trace it and sometimes even get the contents of it. So, yeah, and unfortunately, I think that's going to continue.
It's amazing. So, Ed, we started off talking about Jeffrey Epstein, and you actually, I'm just calling it discovering Jeffrey Epstein, because you came to know and expose this guy for what he was before anybody even knew his name. Talk just a little bit about that.
That's true. I did the first radio show about Jeffrey Epstein, okay, back in 2012, 2013, and I couldn't even find a guest that knew anything about him. So we were in on this early on from the start. You know, a lot of other guys out there, Pierce Redmond, William Ramsey, a lot of guys were working on it too. But I don't know, I just discovered it out of nowhere, and it really took off. I interviewed a lot of people, Stephen Hoffenberg, his former business partner and mentor. I interview him all the time. So a lot of work on Epstein, yeah.
Yeah. What was probably the thing that you found most remarkable about him when you first started looking at that case?
I was in a waiting room. I was in an office, and I saw a newspaper article. So I must have been in Florida, okay? And I saw about this billionaire who was having these three little girls come over to his house every day, and he got away scot-free. And I says, wow, when I first got a radio show, I says, wow, that's a really interesting story. People should know about this, that this is going on. And its connection at the time to Clinton was widespread, was known a little bit, because he flew on the plane with Clinton. So I thought people needed to know about it. And I got Robert Morrow, who wrote the book about, he wrote a bunch of books about the Clinton crime family and about the Bushes, a bunch of good books. Robert Morrow wrote for Roger Stone. He used to ghostwrite for Roger Stone. And he was the first guy I had come on and talk about Epstein.
That's so Chief, one of the things I think is amazing that as I have studied Jeffrey Epstein is this is a guy who started out as a physics and a math teacher, if I remember right, Ed. He started at the Duncan School in Upper Manhattan, and there he positioned himself where he had access to these young students, which we find after watching the course of his experience that those were really preferential kinds of kids. He, along the way, becomes friends with one of the family members of one of the kids at Bear Stearns. Is that right, Ed?
Actually, it was the Dalton School that he became a teacher at, and he befriended one of the students, the little girls over there. He was mentoring her, and her dad worked at, I forget if it was Bear Stearns. I think it was Bear Stearns. I forget which one, but one of the big brokerage houses. Then he left there, and the gentleman who hooked him up with Tower Financial also had an intelligence background. I forget his name right now. He was an Asian intelligence guy, and he hooked him up with Stephen Hoffenberg. And Epstein came to work for Hoffenberg over at Tower Financial. And then what happened was they had hired Rudy Giuliani, who was their corporate counsel at Tower Financial. And then there was some, they call it the biggest Ponzi scheme with Tower Financial. Okay, the biggest before Madoff was the biggest one, like $400 million. As a matter of fact, Hoffenberg has a judgment against him. He has to come up with $400 million in restitution. But what happened was they let Hoffenberg hold the bag on that case, and Giuliani and what's his name, Epstein and Enzyke and all these guys skated on all that, and Hoffenberg winds up going to prison for 9 years. So Hoffenberg doesn't let this go. He's like a dog with a bone. Every night he's in his bunk. How's he going to get Epstein back? So he comes out and he hits the ground running. And Hoffenberg's the one who got this whole case opened up in the Virgin Islands, where the trust is located right now, going after that money for the trust. So there's a lot going on still with Epstein behind the scenes.
Yeah, well, we're going to talk about this a little more in the podcast, and we're even going to explore some of the things surrounding Epstein's death. But I wanted to just show a little preview of what we've got coming on the podcast and invite everybody out there in the Profiling Evil family to go get the podcast. It's free of charge, and join up with us on that. So let's play this for a minute. Welcome to the Profiling Evil podcast. I'm Mike King, and during my law enforcement career, I investigated some of the most complex crimes imaginable. Now, I use that experience to explore true crime in a way that's compelling and captivating. In this episode, we're going to be looking at the evolving dark side of Jeffrey Epstein. I'm joined by one of the finest private investigators in the world, and he's going to share some of the evidence he uncovered in this investigation. Yeah, we'll stop it right there because I want everybody to be ready to hear Ed and hear this story. These are going to be released every Wednesday. We think you're going to find them compelling. And I don't know, Johnathan, are you a podcast listener?
I will be now.
Well, Ed, I can't thank you enough. I know you got a ton of stuff going on, and it was so kind of you to jump on. I don't know. We recently did a podcast on your channel regarding my book. I can't thank you enough for pushing that and rolling that out. But it's been really interesting to hear some of this information that you've uncovered.
Yeah, that's a great story about that case up there in Utah with all those kids being molested by those. Did you catch the book there, Mr. Llewellyn?
I did not.
Oh, you got to check it out. It's a fascinating story.
It's self-promoting, but I'm going to hold it up. There
I
it
did
is.
that
Right
just to give. I just wanted to give you a chance to do that. So.
Yeah, very nicely done. I do get a few people accusing me of just pitching the book all the time, but you got to pitch it. I mean, it's my channel.
Yeah. I'm going to buy it.
Well, Ed, thanks so much. We're gonna see you on Wednesday night, and will you come back to choir practice?
Yeah, sure, anytime. A little earlier in the night. I could have
Yeah.
earlier.
It is early on the West Coast.
Yeah. I get up like 3 o'clock in the morning every day, so I get up very early.
It's past my bedtime here.
Oh yeah, I know. Hey, me too. Me too. Well, guys, thank you so much for having me.
Thanks a
Good to
lot.
meet you.
See you later, Ed. At 12-Step Woman, thanks for that really kind super sticker. That is so nice of you. Folks, if you have any questions for Chief Lewin, let's shoot them out. Here's the question from Darcy Ann we didn't get to earlier. Do Chicago communities with drive-bys which injure or kill children, are they more likely to speak up, or do they still remain quiet?
I mean, I from what I've seen, it seems like they are, because that tends to cause a sense of outrage in the communities and causes people to speak up. But I always wonder why that doesn't happen with every crime. It's of course it's terrible when a child gets shot, injured. That's like the worst thing. But it's terrible when anybody gets injured. And I just, again, without the community's help, it just makes it that much more difficult to solve crime. I'm in a lot of Facebook groups where the community will get together and people will start sharing information, and that's the kind of thing that leads to case closures. Getting tips, getting imagery, private security camera footage, Ring camera video, tips from the community, and these tips can be provided anonymously in most jurisdictions. So that's really important. But yes, to answer that question specifically, I have seen more community participation when a child is the victim. Yes.
Yeah, that's great. I mean, do we really have as big a problem as the media might portray, or are we kind of staying status quo?
I think, unfortunately, and you saw the stats, I think we do have as big a problem as the media portrays. In fact, I think it's actually worse, again, because the headlines are being overshadowed by things like COVID, which is obviously also a catastrophe and has ended many lives and made many people sick and caused untold damage to the economy and is awful. But these crime stats, the worst even worse than 1968. That's pretty stunning, and I just don't think it's gotten the national play because of so many competing bad things. I mean, it's almost like how many bad things can we handle at once, and that I think is leading to as one of the professors I cited earlier talked about, this anger and this confluence of bad things all happening at once it's unprecedented.
Yeah. Are we, here's a question from Heather Marie. What's your take on the carjackings that are happening around Chicago?
It's hard to say what the root cause is, but as you know, the offenders are often juveniles, and the whole juvenile justice system has its own set of challenges. I know they did just clear a case, hopefully that is going to involve multiple incidents. So hopefully that's good news, but I don't know what the answer to that is. I don't know what the root cause is. Clearly it's a problem. That's one of the violent crimes that's increasing, along with, unfortunately, robberies and homicides and probably aggravated battery with firearms, shootings. They're all increasing, not just in one city, but in almost every city. And it's not a political issue, because cities that are under Democratic leadership and cities that are under Republican leadership are experiencing the same increases. So it's really a national issue. I mean, I'm looking, New Orleans is up 61%. St. Louis is up 34%. These are murders, 2019 to 2020. Boston up 54%. Nashville is up 40%. I mean, it's everywhere, all around the country. Milwaukee is up 94%, almost 95%. It's unprecedented, this level of violent crime increase.
Yeah, it really is troubling. In your opinion, Chief, and if we're getting too political, just reel me back in. But are we also trying so hard on the de-escalation side and less lethal side, are we starting to get to the point where we might be putting police officers at risk because they're not taking appropriate measures at the right time?
Well, again, I'm going to go back to that National Police Platform, National Police Research Platform survey, and this was from 2017. I would argue, if anything, things might have even this might have even become more profound. But at that time, 76% of the nearly 8,000 respondents said they were more reluctant to use force when appropriate, and presumably that would mean appropriate force when appropriate. So if a majority of officers are reluctant to use force, or that to me could create an officer safety issue. I don't have any stats to prove that at this point. I haven't found any research that actually backs that up, but just that survey response indicates that could be an issue.
Yeah, and is it one of those precipitating factors that cause us problems down the road? We've seen an increase almost to one officer per day dying in 2020. Thus far in 2021, I think I looked at the Officer Down Memorial page yesterday, and it seemed like we were in the 40s, which is a little less than one per day. But the numbers that are line of duty deaths as a result of gunshot or auto accident are staying fairly consistent. We're seeing it in COVID numbers in some departments. Los Angeles, I think, has lost 8 or 9 police officers to COVID. I don't know what the city of Chicago's done.
Yeah, I don't remember the stats exactly, but I know Chicago has had a couple of deaths due to COVID.
Yeah, it's tough. Well, Catherine Smith says, what's your take on Nobel releases? My relative's team has literally rearrested some of the guys on murder within days, releasing carjackers because of juvenile detention facilities are closed.
Without providing my personal opinion, I will say that many people's opinion is that is one reason that you're seeing offenders commit crimes at a younger and younger age, because gangs know that the younger the offender, the less likely they are to be housed. So the likelihood that they're going to have, be back on the street sometimes within hours increases when their age decreases, and often for violent crimes. So yeah, I definitely, personally, I can say that I do think there needs to be some reform in that system.
Yeah. Mimi J2, Chief Lewin, as a tourist to Chicago in the possible future, where should I not go besides Lou Malnati's?
And I don't want to disparage Lou Malnati's pizza. Any pizza in Chicago is better than any pizza in New York.
I have to say my favorite is Lou Malnati's, especially the house salad. So,
okay, well that's the healthy element of it. So one thing about Chicago is that Chicago is very transparent with sharing its crime data, and you'll be happy to hear if you go to gis.chicagopolice.org, you'll find a mapping portal developed by our own Joe Keyson, using tools from your own company that will show you where crime has occurred. And I think Chicago shares more crime data than any other city in the U.S. So that transparency, I think, is also really important towards creating trust and building a dialogue with the community. So I encourage people to check that out, and you can see where crime is occurring. But also, Chicago is a safe city, and these big cities, even with their increases in violent crime, I personally think they're safe. It's not like you're going to walk down the street and be the victim of crime. And again, we talked about this earlier. Unfortunately, a vast majority of the crime in most of these cities is highly concentrated in small areas. I can't remember the exact percentage of the geography that accounted for a majority of the crime when I looked at Chicago, but it was a relatively small geography that unfortunately had a disproportionate amount of crime. So to that question, you can use those tools to help at least be aware of where crime might be likely to occur based on where it's occurred in the past, and just be aware. I don't even walk down the street at night by myself anywhere, not Chicago, but when I'm traveling, I don't. If it's after dark, I always try to walk with somebody. Just be aware of your surroundings. Let people know where you're going. So if you don't arrive, somebody can check on you. And there's just like in any time you go out, I would just be aware of your surroundings.
Yeah, I think that's really good counsel, Chief. We've talked about it before, that risk reduction is the best crime reduction strategy, and that is just being wise. Don't put yourself in a position where you can be victimized or a target. Chief, will you please come back? I've had a blast having you here. I hope you've had fun.
Yeah, this is great. Hopefully I didn't get anybody in trouble, but it's been great.
Well, I think it'd be fun when you get back. Maybe we'll get Ed on or something, and we could talk about the network. We could talk about what is happening to help law enforcement around the United States and abroad. But I definitely want to have you back. And to everyone who joined us tonight, I want to say thanks. I want to again just salute Officer Rich Riley from Montgomery Police Department. This is the epitome of what law enforcement does every day. Sadly, we don't hear the good stories as much as we hear the mistakes and the shortcomings. But it is a noble profession. I am so honored to have been in it. I'm honored that I have been able to serve in it with you, Johnathan. And I really thank you for your 30 years of serving, especially serving the city of Chicago, Illinois.
Well, Mike, thanks for your service too, and your giving back with this series, and this has been great. I was just thrilled to be here, so thanks for having me.
Thanks. Well, folks, we'll see you next week on Profiling Evil. Remember, the podcast, you can start on Wednesday getting the podcast, but I think you can register for it now. We'll post that out, and you can take advantage of that. And, of course, you can go back and watch any of our videos on the YouTube channel. And always you can go to profilingevil.com where you can get the story maps, get the updated story maps, including the one most recently on Abby and Libby and the murders in Delphi. And we'll just keep plugging away and look forward to seeing you next week. Thanks so much. Have a good night, Chief.
Take care. Thanks, Mike.